Excellencies, everyone here in the room, hello and welcome to the third and final day of Black Hat Mia. I know there's only a few of you in the room, but how are we doing? Give me a yay. How are we doing? That's what I like, lots of energy on the third and final day. Now by now, you should probably know who I am, but in case you don't, my name is Lucy Hedges. I'm the technology editor for the Metro newspaper in the UK, one of the biggest newspapers in the UK. I'm also someone who you might occasionally see talking tech and travel on the BBC. Now in my capacity as a journalist, I'm constantly warning or telling my readers about the pitfalls and perils of remaining secure online, constantly giving out advice. We've got a piece called Gadget Doctor, which I really love, and we're constantly handing out advice to help people ensure that they're safe with their devices and their online identity is protected. Whether or not they listen is another matter, but that's on them. I do my duty letting them know exactly how to stay safe. So on that, it really has been amazing to share this stage of international experts from all corners of the planet as they share their insights and expertise and stories in the cybersecurity community. Now, it goes without saying that hosting this momentous event here in the Kingdom is an incredibly huge achievement for the region. You know, the amount of work and time and effort that has gone into this event has just been unbelievable. I mean, you only need to look at this stage to know that the effort that's gone into this event has been incredibly monumental. We've got activations, we've got the villages situated around the conference halls, and we've got incredible competitions, one of which is going to culminate on this very stage today. I am talking about the Cyber Seed competition. Now, as we know, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you, we've been talking about this for the last 2 days, cybersecurity is more important than ever. That's, of course, why we're all here. But it's also more complicated, it's more multifaceted than ever before, which only really serves to bolster just how important holding this event here in the region really is. Now, over the last couple of days, we've had professionals from all different countries, all walks of life, descending onto Riyadh to share all their impactful stories and experiences, so you guys can learn about the latest developments, innovations, the latest threats, and of course, how to better protect your organizations. Now, we have had an incredible 2 days. I'm sure I don't need to tell you that, and expect much of the same today for our third and final day. So, are you ready to kick off? Yes, so on that note, we're going to play that amazing video again. If you haven't seen it already, prepare to have your mind a little bit blown. Welcome once again to Black Hat Mia.
They can take down resources you thought they couldn't. Stealing our identity and financial security. Standing in the way of justice. Watching our loved ones disrupting markets and even obstructing critical care. Have we lost the battle?
Even after 3 days, I honestly cannot get enough of that video. It does such an incredible job of really encapsulating the essence and the vibe of what this event is all about. So now we're going to kick off with our very first session. We've got an exciting conversation that's about to happen on this stage, so I hope you're ready. Now, as we know, Organizations are dealing with unprecedented cybersecurity challenges, from digital supply chain vulnerabilities and a surge in ransomware to a proliferation of data and new risks from emerging technologies. So, I'm about to invite Equifax EVP and CISO Jamil Farshi, who will share the most pressing matters in cybersecurity and what needs to be on every organization's priority list for 2023. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Jamil Farshi. Hello.
Hi.
Hey. How are you, Jamil?
It's tough to follow up that video, I'll tell you that.
I know. That's a pretty epic video, isn't it?
It is,
The team have
absolutely.
done a fantastic job. Okay, guys, so I'm just going to kind of set the tone a little bit and tell you a little bit about Jamil before we fire into this conversation. So Jamil has led back-to-back cybersecurity turnarounds at Equifax and the Home Depot, jumping in after mega breaches at both companies. He's also served as a security leader at Visa, where he protected trillions of dollars of payment transactions, and NASA, where he protected emerging technologies as well. Now, in addition to his job leading cybersecurity at Equifax, he also serves as a strategic advisor to the FBI. Oh, you've been around, haven't you? You've done a lot. Now, as one of the world's largest credit agencies, Equifax has custody of data on more than 800 million individuals and 88 million companies. So, you know, just a small responsibility then. And before joining Equifax, he was responsible for protecting the US space program during his time with NASA, as well as its nuclear arsenal when he was with Los Alamos National Laboratory. So if anyone is well versed to talk about the cybersecurity landscape in 2023, it's this guy. Okay, so Jamil, as we near the end of 2022, what is it in cybersecurity that surprised you the most this year?
I mean, where to begin? I mean, pick your poison. We had the war in Ukraine to begin with. We had a bit of a lull after that. There's been a huge spike in ransomware. We had a Sullivan case where the first CISO ever to be convicted of a crime. I mean, it's just, I don't even know where to begin in that space. There's so much going on in this area that it certainly keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, and I think it's just what you just mentioned is testament to just how much the cybersecurity landscape is changing and just kind of really evolving at this really fast and vertiginous pace that is insane, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. That's why we're here, though, right? I mean,
Exactly.
it's the challenge and always being able to deal with new threats. It keeps things exciting.
Yeah, it keeps us on our toes, right? So what's one cybersecurity challenge? Oh, no, sorry, let me ask this one. What's the biggest cyber threat facing business and government today?
You know, I think the biggest threat is the lack of preparedness. There's a whole slew of, I mean, you saw it in the video we discussed here a second ago, of threats that we all have to face. And we're necessarily in an arms race in cybersecurity, where whatever we do on the defender side, there's always going to be a step up for the attackers to be able to find a way around it. So we have to be comfortable knowing that there will be an incident. There are going to be breaches that we're going to have to deal with. The problem is that if we're not prepared for them, then they're going to be markedly worse than they ever would be otherwise. If you have good preparedness in place, then you're able to stem that tide. And I liken it to a boxer in a match, right? You're in the late rounds, you get hit in the gut, you fall to the ground. The question is, are you going to be able to get back up?
Yeah.
Can you get back up? Do you have have you done the training? Like, have you done the exercise to be able to make sure that you've got that conditioning in place? Do you know how to do it? And I think organizations, time and again, as you read about the breaches and you learn about what actually happened, just don't have that kind of muscle memory built in. And so I think that, above all else, should be our focus.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that, because it's something that we've been talking about on this stage, this lack of preparation or kind of jumping on something once an incident's happened, once a breach has taken place, but it's about having that infrastructure in place to make sure you're prepared for anything. So based on that then, I'll just wait for this. You gotta love an interruption.
Okay.
Okay, I'll come back to my question. So based on what you just said, what advice then do you have for organizations and businesses and about when it comes to individual training and knowledge to ensure that people are up to date with the latest trends, innovations, threats?
Yeah. So I want you guys to think about this. Not that. I want you to think about this. That's tough.
We are competing with some serious noise pollution right now.
Okay, I'll just continue. I want you to think about this. Think about your own education. And, whether it's from kindergarten up to college, maybe you have a PhD, whatever. Think about the regimen that you went through for school and how you learned what you know today. And then contrast that with what we do in security for our training and awareness to be able to train up thousands and thousands of people throughout our workforce. And you'll quickly realize that there's a huge chasm there. Like we train our people once a year, and maybe it's for 30 minutes, maybe it's for an hour, and then you give them a 10-question test, and then you say, okay, go off on your way. To learn things that are vitally important to protect the organization, and things that are fundamentally super complex. And so what we need to do is be able to figure out a way to be able to focus on the behaviors that matter most, do it in a continuous fashion, and then provide meaningful quantitative results back to them. And so that's one of the things that we've done that has just been fantastic for the workforce, and we've seen their results skyrocket as a result of it. Is what we did is we automated the process. We identified core behaviors that we want every employee in the company to exhibit. So everything from make sure you don't click on a bad link, to correct behaviors on the web, to making sure you terminate your employees on time so they don't retain access after they leave. And we track all this stuff, and then we provide a report card to every single individual in the company, every single one, with a score every single month. So they get to be able to see relatively real-time information about their specific performance. And then what we did is we tied it to their compensation. And so if you do this mix, what happens is that it drives the right incentives, but it provides that continuous training and learning that people need to be able to actually fundamentally understand how to do something and be able to improve their ultimate behaviors. And I can tell you firsthand, the scores of our employees and the level of competition that they have generated amongst each other using something like this has been off the charts. And so I think using those principles really puts you at a next level.
Yeah, so a clear example then that taking the time to implement that training, implementing that knowledge really does pay off. And you see results. Absolutely. So tell me, Jamil, what's one security challenge that you think that doesn't get enough attention today?
I think one of the most important ones is board visibility, executive sponsorship. We are oftentimes as CISOs fighting a battle where we're a one-man team. We're the other, the security team of other, and without that level of support, then it's very, very difficult to be able to drive the culture change one needs to be able to defend against the latest threats. It is difficult, our jobs are difficult enough as they are, without having to add in the fact that we aren't getting the funding that we need to be able to make the right technology investments or the labor investments, without getting the support from technology to be able to make the necessary changes that we need to be able to secure the organization, or without ever even seeing the board of directors, and being able to talk about what those risks are and build in strong risk governance practices. So I think that level of support at the executive level broadly needs to shift. And we need to realize that security, as you saw in the video a minute ago, is a critical function for any organization. And I would argue that of all of the risks and threats that are out there that face organizations today, there is none. There's not one that I can think of that has the same consequence and likelihood as cybersecurity.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to ask the organizers if we can get the music turned down. I'm sure, I don't know if you guys can hear it as loud as we can, but it is coming at us thick and fast. There we go. I can hear you properly now. Jamil, what do you see as the most important cyber action item for policymakers in the US?
I think the number one needs to be around reporting. Right now in the US, and I think globally, we've been seeing a lot of movement in this space. There's a multitude of regulations that are coming out, and I think they're all well-spirited, but the fact that they contradict each other in many ways, I mean, let's take disclosure. There are some regulations that require disclosure in 24 hours, other ones in 48, other ones in 72. Some it's 72 if it's material, other ones 72 if it's material and it's ransomware. There's so many different requirements that we're all being held to right now that it's difficult to be able to navigate it all. And I think that we need more unification and standardization so we have one sheet, one playbook to be able to work by. If there was one specific regulation that I think that we need more than anything, it would be a federal privacy law. The consumers are at a loss here because depending on what state you're in, if you're in Massachusetts or California, you probably have pretty good protections. But if you're in other states like Arkansas or Mississippi, you're pretty much on your own. And so I think that this puts the consumers at a disadvantage. And by being able to have one unified privacy law, it would make security practitioners' jobs easier because instead of trying to unwind all of the different requirements that we have, we'd be able to, during an incident, we'd be able to actually focus on the incident itself. And secondly, it provides the right level of protection to the affected consumers.
It's interesting you say that. It's a sentiment that has been echoed yesterday, the day before, that we need this unified, more streamlined set of regulations, because otherwise, like you said, it does get confusing. And when we were just talking about the US then, but on a worldwide capacity as well, it's even more confusing because certain countries, they're not correlating. And until we get that correlation, we're not going to get the end product that we want. It's going to continue to be this mental minefield, different people chucking their 2 pennies into the pot, and we're not going to have this unified goal together.
Yeah, and think about this. When you're in the midst of an incident, I mean, any incident, but think about a meaningful one. Time is of the essence. And look, I speak from coming in after 2 of the largest breaches of all time. Time is absolutely of the essence. And so would you rather have your incident responders, that team, focused on being able to identify what happened and being able to remediate it? Or would you rather them having to split the difference and work and try to figure out, look, do I have to report this? Not, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And so we need clarity on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we've been talking a lot about new emerging threats, innovations, new technology. As someone who's a massive purveyor of tech, I know more than full well how much this new technology is really impacting the cybersecurity space. But what I want to ask you is, what emerging technologies pose the most risk or will be relied on to help mitigate risk, or both?
This is a tough one. I mean, look, there's so many technologies out there, and they're good and bad. I mean, we can talk about quantum, for example. Some people are super excited about it. Other people are, they're afraid of it. Other things, you've got AI, ML, and hey, the opportunities, some people are excited, others not. Metaverse, some people are excited, other people are like, oh my gosh, another thing. So there's a ton of those things. But here's the key, and I know you report on technology a lot, so don't get mad at me for when I say this. But here's the deal. Technology is it's like a toothbrush. It's fine and great, but unless you're using it every single day, unless you're doing it properly, and unless you're using it with the right things like toothpaste, then it's not going to be effective, right? It's not going to be. Yet, most of us who have been through the ranks here, we can, if we look back at our careers, we can look back at the graveyard of technologies that we've all sort of thrown away because it didn't, generate the ROI or whatever we ultimately needed. And so I think because we come up through technical ranks, most of us, we love technology. Now, I am one of them as well. And so we find that shiny new object and we gravitate to it, or we get scared of it. When in fact, I think we do that at the expense of some of the more critical things. And those things are things like the culture of the organization, your risk governance practices, the underlying processes within your organization. And when we look back at the vast majority of security incidents that there are, it's not because there was some lack of next-gen emerging technology that we didn't have in place, or that there was one that attacked us with it. It's because of the fundamental basic things that we continue to not be able to do.
And it's interesting, with technology, same with having the preparedness for cybersecurity. You need to keep up to date with the latest innovations, latest trends, because you need to understand how it's going to help you or how it's going to hinder you. And it's just as important as making sure organizations, employees are as up to date with the latest technology and innovations as they are with the changes that are happening in the cybersecurity landscape. One thing that I am constantly telling my readers and my family, mainly my mum and dad, you've got to keep up with the latest technology, otherwise you will get left behind. And that is so true. true in so many aspects of the world, especially when it comes to cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what needs to be on every leader's radar then when it comes to cybersecurity in 2023?
I think there's a lot of things. There's one that's really concerned me as of late, and that is multi-factor authentication. And I know you might think, well, that sounds boring, Jamil. But here's the reality of it. For security practitioners, certainly CISOs, there's been a control that's effectively been a no regrets investment for many, many years, and that's multi-factor authentication. You step into a new organization, you're like, okay, cool, I'm definitely going to invest in that if they don't have it in place. The problem, though, is that over the course of the past year, and we saw it back with Okta in January, and then there's been Uber, Microsoft. There's been a whole host of victims of this year. It's been bypassed, and it's in a pretty simple way. You just brute force it, and users are clicking on it, and it lets you into the organization. The problem with it, though, is this: unlike something like phishing, where we have good back-end technical controls. If you have an EDR in place, for example, it's going to stop the vast majority of that stuff, even if a user clicks on it. With MFA bypass, you click on that thing, and then you effectively have an authorized user within your environment. It becomes really, really tough to be able to detect them. And the solution to it is, let's levy on yet another factor in addition to it, which continues to be another problem that we have, which is the usability of the security tools themselves. So you're put in this position where it's like, either I do that and I affect the workforce and their productivity, or I sort of go blind to this thing and I generate a meaningful risk that I'm going to get, Lapsus is going to use it to be able to pop my organization. So I think it's this breed of types of attacks that worry me most as we head into 23, because most importantly, the bad guys, when they see something works, they copy it. They copy it in spades. And we've seen it with ransomware, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to find a solve in this space as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are some of the most common cybersecurity mistakes that you've come across this year, or just in the past, that organizations really, really need to avoid and stay clear of in 2023?
Well, I mean, I think there's a whole host of them, but, but I mean, I'd go back to preparedness on this one. It's that we just do not like to focus on preparedness. Like, ask yourself this. Maybe you do crisis exercises, but do you do them at the executive level? If you do them at the executive level, have you actually gone through and scoped out who are those third-party providers that you're going to need to bring in to be able to help you during those times? If you've defined them to even to a meaningful degree, have you set up agreements with them so that they can come in and be able to help you on a dime? Because they're at capacity themselves. I mean, if we look at Australia, for example, right now, they got hit with many multiple attacks, at least 5 in a month's time. And as a result of that, they lost over half of the entire population of Australia's personal information. Some of it healthcare information, which is very, very sensitive. And what happened is that the capacity of the vendor, of the third parties, to be able to come in and assist, of even the government, has been stretched to as thin as it can possibly get. And so wherever you are, being able to plan through this stuff is absolutely essential, yet we consistently find that organizations, oops, I didn't think it was going to happen to me. And it's just not an acceptable answer anymore.
Well, it's like, I think someone was on the stage yesterday talking about, assume breach, always be prepared. The inevitable is going to happen, so that's where your mindset should be. And it's interesting that you mentioned Australia, actually, because we had someone on stage yesterday from Titania talking about just how unprepared Australia is for these kind of attacks. And they're only really now just building their cybersecurity infrastructure, which is quite shocking for us all to hear, really, that they're not as prepared as other regions and other countries. So it's quite jaw-dropping in this day and age to hear that a country of such huge proportions isn't ready for these kind of attacks.
Well, and one that's heavily reliant on digitization and technology. I mean, if your economy, if your society heavily relies on that, then you would hope and you would expect that you've made the proper investments and have the right level of awareness to be able to protect it. Now, I will give Australia credit, though. They've been working in that direction, and they have made demonstrable improvement over the past several years. The problem is that it just wasn't and hasn't been enough. My hope is that the silver lining to what's happening there today is that it is now been a groundswell of support and urgent sense of urgency to be able to make those right investments, for the government to establish the right policies and requirements to be able to help usher them into the next generation.
Yeah, so I just want to go back to the word preparedness again. And one of the things that I noticed working with companies or just having an insight into certain companies, that a lot of organizations put the onus on CISOs, on the C-suite, and that it's their problem and you have to deal with it, when really it's everyone's problem. Everyone needs to get involved, accept accountability. And do you find that's a problem, a problem among organizations?
Yeah, this is the security of other. Everyone thinks that security is security's responsibility, which is flat wrong. And just like most any other function with any other organization, we all have some level of ownership for that. And so if security isn't everyone's responsibility in an organization, you're going to fall flat, because you necessarily have a smaller security group. The resources just aren't all entirely there. Plus the level of reliance on other organizations like technology, like finance, marketing, product. Like, you need to have it be able to be built in. And without being able to have that, it means that you don't have the right culture in place, ultimately, or the tone from the top, to be able to ultimately succeed there.
Yeah, it really is.
But we see it everywhere. That's the part.
Yeah, exactly. It really is about shifting that mindset. It's been echoed time and time again on this stage over the past 2 days. And until that happens, we're not really going to see monumental change, really.
Yeah. Well, we're in an echo chamber here because we're all on the same team. That's probably why.
So over the last couple of days, we were talking a lot about skill shortages and, closing the skills gap, and this desire, this need to really educate and train people who have the knowledge, the interest to really bolster the sector, bolster organizations. So what would your advice be to businesses looking to attract more talent and really build that talent pool?
I would say don't. I would say don't try to attract talent. And here's why. Everyone's looking for that unicorn, and this is sort of the basis for why this happens. Everyone wants that person who's amazing at cloud architecture, and they've got engineering background, they understand risk. Those people don't exist. And if they do, they most likely aren't probably going to come to your company, or if they do come to your company, it's going to be for a year tops. What we need to do, I think, as a community, is focus on the people that we already have. We've got a lot of super talented, motivated, passionate individuals. The problem is we always look because the grass is always greener, instead of investing in those folks. And what happens when you invest in those people is that they become your strongest advocates. Not only do they improve and get to the point where they're doing a fantastic job protecting your organization, but eventually they will move on. And then they will be advocates for your organization. And they will be a demonstrable example of what you've been able to accomplish, which will then attract people to your organization. Going out and searching constantly, look, it's okay on a point-by-point basis or for some specific fit-for-purpose kind of role, but we've got to focus more on developing the talent that we already have on board.
Yeah, so would you say then that's one of the misconceptions then about cybersecurity in organizations, this need to run out and get the latest talent without realizing that what you've got at home is what's going to help bolster your company?
It is, and I speak from experience, because look, y'all, I've done this myself. I've gone to all of the talent things and go to all of the colleges and try to recruit everyone, and that's great. Like, it's good to have, you need to have a pipeline, obviously, but to do it at the expense of what you have on board, I can assure you, you will have a ton of people on your own team who are hungry and just waiting for the opportunity to be able to step up. We just have to give them that path to do so.
Absolutely, I could not agree more with that. So what do you think are some of the other misconceptions then around organizations and cybersecurity?
Well, here's one. This whole thing about, we were talking about this earlier today, this whole thing around advanced threats and how everything is so super sophisticated. We hear it in the news all the time, and it's almost every single incident or breach that we see, it was APT or it was some nation state or whatever. It's BS. It's BS. Do those things happen? Sure, they do happen occasionally. But the vast majority of issues out there are pretty basic, guys. They're pretty basic. Just the fundamental things. I didn't patch my system. I didn't know my asset inventory. I didn't know that asset even existed. I didn't have my certificates up there. These basic fundamental things are what bites us almost every single time. So yes, there are some super scary things out there, really bleeding edge attacks that will bypass a lot of things in the O days and whatever. But the bottom line is, that's fine, but you've got to be able to do the fundamentals first. That's always got to be our focus, and consistently, over and over again, we've just proven that as a community, like, we don't and aren't interested enough in doing and having the discipline to do those fundamentals day in and day out.
Yeah, absolutely. Nearing to the end of our time here, so I've got to ask, Jamil, as someone who has incredible responsibility, what keeps you up at night, if anything?
Well, I have a 1-year-old, so that's that's a factor there. Look, there's a lot of things that worry me about security, but nothing really keeps me up, and here's why. It's because of events like this, and it's because of the community that we have here. I mean, I can't tell you, I mean, I go all around the world, and I have teams out there, and I go to meet other folks. The community, this is such a fantastic group of individuals. People wanting to learn, wanting to collaborate, willing to share information. I mean, we talk all the time about how we need more information sharing, but we do a great job, certainly on a one-on-one basis, and with so many of us. And so I think what really gives me hope, not fear, not keeping me up, is that we continue to progress. If I look at where this industry is today relative to a decade ago, it blows you away. It's easy to get mired in all of the day-to-day and some new threat or some new breach that happened or whatever. But I think that if we can look to the left of us, look to the right of us, and realize that we're all in this together, that we're all genuinely good-spirited, and that we're fighting the bad guys out there, and that we're willing to help each other out, it gives me a lot of joy and hope for the future.
Yeah, I love the way that you just spun my negative question into a positive. I love that, Jamil. And a great sentiment to end this conversation on. I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to come here and talk with us. I'm sure you guys have appreciated hearing from Jamil. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lucy. Appreciate it. Thanks. Thank you.
All right, that's a great conversation, wasn't it? Okay, so next up we are talking sustainable cybersecurity. Now, a sustainable cybersecurity strategy is one that takes into account the budgetary and resource constraints of the organization. It requires an ongoing commitment to security, awareness and training, as well as a streamlined focus on risk management. Now, this talk is going to highlight the core concepts of sustainable cybersecurity and share practices, insights on how to reduce complexity even, invest resources effectively, and mitigate cyber risk without exhausting people. So it's a complex topic, but luckily our next speaker is an expert in this field and really knows her stuff. So please welcome to the stage Dr. Magda Celi, CISO for Responsible Cyber PTE. Thank you.
Hello everyone. I'm loud. Yes, I realize that. أصحاب المعالي والسعادة والحضور الكريم. شكرا جزيلا على حضوركم. أنا سعيدة كثيرا بتواجدي في هذا الملتقى الرائع بكل المقاييس. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my speech about sustainable cybersecurity. I am Magda Celi, and I'm a Polish citizen who landed in Singapore 8 years ago and co-founded a cybersecurity startup. As many of you, I have been through one of the most challenging times in my life, the pandemic. And COVID-19, I guess, is a word that you don't want to hear anymore, right? Well, COVID-19, while it brought a lot of negative things, at the same time, it helped companies to adopt technology faster, bringing technology to businesses, allowing digital transactions, and more comfort to the end users. However,